Welcome into a Friday night edition of the Hoosier Illustrated Indiana Basketball Postgame Wrap-Up Show. John Alden from In Touch with Indiana Sports and basketball recruiting analyst Kyler Staley with you once again. Hoosiers get a 76-57 victory, improving to 7-2 on the year as they look forward to conference play beginning with Minnesota next week. Kyler, welcome in. Hope you enjoyed your evening at Assembly Hall.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, I would say, for a little bit, but Indiana started off pretty hot, got the lead to 10 pretty quickly. And then you got to give Miami, Ohio a bunch of credit because I had mentioned in my pre-games and anything that, we talked about leading up to this game, this Miami team is pretty tough, and they don't have the size or anything like that, but the team just competes, and I know a couple people on that staff, and I know how they coach, and they got some dogs on their team. Pete Suter, a Carmel, Indiana native, tonight proved that he's a dog in a lot of ways, and he took it to Indiana. But the good thing about this, and obviously it got a little scary, it was way too close, but the final 10 minutes for Indiana, they started playing like they should against a team like this, a team that doesn't match up to them size-wise, doesn't have as much talent as what they have. They really started putting it together, and I think the big reason is, and this may be a little controversial or whatever, but I think the two big lineup of Ballo and Renew was a major factor today. And I think that's when Indiana was at their best, when they were on the floor together. And I know a lot of people are being like, well, I don't know about that, blah, 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 stuff. But if you look at the statistics and how they were using those two guys, there's no size on Miami, Ohio. And then you also throw in the fact that Miles Rice was playing as the aggressor. He was playing like the guy that was looking to score first and then make his play second. That's what Indiana needs, and it opened up so much more. So ended up getting, a 76-57 win. So you'll take that, but still a lot of things to clean up, especially on the defensive end.
I don't have any issue with you mentioning that the two big lineup worked tonight. And I think like that whenever Mike Woodson is able to get these guys to play the way that he wants them to, there's nothing wrong with the two big lineup. I think the issue that we saw tonight is just laziness on defense, particularly late in the first half, and it kind of continued on a little bit into the second half. And there's just moments where this team just seems to get in little, I don't even know what to really call it. It's just a slump where they don't seem to have a rhythm. It takes them a while to kind of figure out what their bread and butter really is for this particular game. And again, you mentioned it. They went with the two bigs later on, and they were both Umar Ballo and Malik Renew had great nights. Malik Renew, 19 points. Umar Ballo had a double-double with 14 points and 18 rebounds. It has to be a season high for rebounds, I feel like.
Oh, it has to. It has to be. I don't quote me on that, but it has to be. But this is actually what's crazy. This is game number 9. This is his first double-double of the season.
That is crazy to think about.
Pretty wild if you think about it. But, going back to the defense, the frustrating part is when you watch them and stuff, it's like, so much talent on the floor or whatever. It's not really that they were having mental lapses on defense. It's just the extra effort that was really, the main factor there. It was, getting back and rotating and communicating and things like that. It just making that extra effort. They almost played in a way during, that middle stretch of the game. They almost played in a way like, man, I hope he doesn't make this shot. I really hope he doesn't, or something like that. And they're like, oh, Ballo's down there. He'll get the rebound. Don't worry. We'll be okay. It was kind of in that situation, and that just can't happen. A team like Minnesota, who's not the best Big Ten team, but, similar caliber, when it comes to conference play, they'll take advantage of that. They really will. And, a team like tonight, Miami, Ohio, even though they're tough or whatever, they just don't have the guys to really take advantage of that. I mean, they still shot 32 times from 3. They gave up way too many threes tonight. And they're very, very fortunate that Miami only hit 11 of them because it could have gotten way worse. It could have been a lot closer. But Indiana's just got to be tougher on defense. That's really what it comes down to, being tougher on defense, knowing what your assignments are, just communicating, and having that willingness to make that extra effort will take this team to a long way. I am not worried about their offense at all. I think it's very clear right now that their offense is really good because they spread the ball around, they have balance, and it doesn't matter. Mackenzie Mbako, who's been pretty much the star of this team, all season long, had a very, very off night tonight. But it was okay because they had 4 other guys that scored in double figures, and that's what's going to be. It comes down to being a defensive team, a defensive-minded team. Mike Woodson, I think, that's his bread and butter, right? That's what he wants to build off of. It's always defense first. He will eventually get these guys to start buying in on the defensive end as long as the players like Luke Goody, Anthony Leal, Trey Galloway, those guys step up and they continue to preach how important defense is. Once they figure that out, Indiana will be just fine.
Yeah, I do feel like that's ultimately going to be the biggest difference between success, especially when they get into the meat of the Big Ten schedule and having another failure of a season. One other thing I want to mention too, you already talked about Mackenzie Mbako having an off night. There were a few moments tonight where Bryson Tucker was in off the bench. It seemed like he had one of his more rough nights just when it comes to decision making. He really looked like kind of more of a freshman tonight than in previous games.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely played like a freshman tonight, and he rushed a lot of shots, and they weren't good shots. There was a mid-range game. We all know about his mid-range game. He wants to get that going. A lot of times, I've seen it over the past few games. He really kind of forces the issue just a little bit too much when it comes to that. He doesn't really.
I will say it is better than being afraid to shoot.
Absolutely,
you could have that.
Definitely, and Indiana's had that in the past. You remember Trey Galloway way back when he was a freshman, sophomore, very, very afraid to shoot. Now Trey Galloway's one of the better shooters tonight. He went 3 for 4 from 3, and I just now realized that he shot the ball incredible. And he mentioned it tonight in the presser. We got to speak with him and Ballo tonight. He said it's just confidence. It's just continue to work and everything. He has a better feel for that 3-point shot, and that's big for Indiana because I think they are a very capable 3-point shooting team. Obviously, the bigs are going to do their thing, but like I said, the balance in the offense is there. I think this team's going to be a good offensive team for the rest of the season. Buying in on defense and getting those stops and getting multiple stops in a row is going to be the big thing for Indiana. And going back to Bryson Tucker, I know we kind of skipped about it. He's going to be fine. Some of the times with you have a freshman like that coming off the bench, you just need to let him play through it in times. And I thought Mike Woodson let him do that at times, but Mike Woodson also took him out when he needed to be taken out.
Any big takeaways from Mike Woodson's post-game press conference?
Not really. Same old, really. It's just, we got to get better. You got to continue to work and everything.
I do want to ask you, I haven't watched many of the post-game pressers or really any of his pressers in general. Does he still use the phrase trying to get over the hump? Because I know that drives people insane.
He has not used that at all this year.
He must be very aware. He must be very aware of that.
Thing is just got to continue to work. But at the same time, and I mentioned this on our podcast episode the other night, it is frustrating to hear him say, we got to continue to work. We got to continue to work. It's true. I mean, this team just can't stop continuing to work. That's the thing. So
that's what every team has to do.
Yeah, every team has to do that, right? But you obviously want to hear a little bit more of what he's got to say and stuff. But one takeaway that he was really, really proud about was Indiana only let Miami, Ohio score 21 points in the second half. And I thought that got a little bit overlooked a little bit, even though we did talk about the defensive lapses and stuff. I think a lot of it has to do with that Miami, Ohio started missing shots or whatever. So it definitely wasn't a complete defensive effort by any stretch, but he was pretty happy about that. He's not worried about Mackenzie Mbako's off night. He said every player's going to have that or whatever. And Mackenzie Mbako also got 3 fouls, I think, called on him, and that really kind of took him out of the swing of things. So other than that, I mean, there's nothing really, I guess, much more you can take away from it other than you just know Big Ten plays on the horizon, starts on Monday, and then they got a trip to Nebraska. It's going to be a very, very important week for Indiana next week, and then they really got to play like they're capable of.
Yeah, it took the words right out of my mouth. Of course, you mentioned Minnesota on Monday. You definitely want to start off 1-0 in that scenario. Again, I don't like to just assume that you're going to win that game because Indiana could very well find a way to lose. Yeah. But based on talent alone, there's no reason that Indiana shouldn't come out on top in that game. And then when you go on the road at Nebraska, in my opinion, this is your chance to kind of make up for one of the losses in the battle for Atlantis. Oh, yeah. It would be, again, that's one of those where you're honestly probably not going to be favored on the road in Nebraska. And that's kind of a shame. But at the same time, we do know Indiana is capable of beating teams like Nebraska on the road. And if they're able to do that, especially if you're coming off of a win against Minnesota, I think it would be safe to see that this team at that point would have a very positive trajectory heading into the rest of the season.
Absolutely, and I'll add to that. I think winning on the road in your conference is much more important than losing a neutral site game to Louisville or Gonzaga.
Fair enough.
If you start off 2-0 in the season, that's big, and then you get to finish out the rest of your non-conference play in the month of December. That would be big for Indiana. So next week, no excuses. You got to beat Minnesota. Minnesota is not a good team. You got to beat them, and then you got to figure out a way to win on the road. It doesn't matter how many points it is. Just figure out a way to win on the road against a really good Nebraska team, and you're sitting just fine heading into the final stretch of your non-conference.
He's Kyler Staley. I'm John. I can't even say my own name. I'm John Alden. This has been another edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com Indiana basketball post-game wrap-up show. Appreciate you tuning in, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching later. In touch with Indiana sports. We'll be back on Monday. We'll react to all that we find out when it comes to the college football playoff rankings finale. We'll learn where Indiana football will be more than likely traveling to in their playoff game. And then, of course, we'll have more basketball coverage throughout the week next week, as we mentioned, 2 important Big Ten games before they step briefly back into non-conference play. And then from January on, it's hitting it hot and heavy with the Big Ten matchups. So until then, like I said, this has been another edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com Indiana basketball post-game wrap-up show.